Hi there. My name is Dani Beaumont, and welcome to Muse Jam Session Recording 180. I am joined today by two of my colleagues from the Muse team. We have Tommy and Anna, and they are going to help me out and keep an eye on chat and any Q&A questions you have for me as I present. If it's on the topic that we've chosen today, go ahead and throw it in the Q&A pod, and Tommy or Anna will go ahead and answer it, or I will swing by and see what seems to be unanswered, and we'll jump in on that. This is a lightly attended session. I take it as a good sign that some of the folks that are familiar with Muse have gotten their arms around the idea of asset management, also coming back from a holiday here in the States. But that's totally fine with me. I think the three of us, along with Chris Kellett, who comes from 123 Muse, we're all available to answer any question you have with Muse. You can be off topic in the chat. That's fine with me. It is just our opportunity. We call this a jam session, although this is the first jam. I think I haven't played banjos in a while. We call it a jam session because we both learn from each other. So this is a great chance for you to tell us what you're experiencing in the tool, questions that you have. If there are jam session topics you want to make sure we cover, go ahead and throw those into the chat, or at the end of the session I'll put up a poll and ask for that feedback. But we do rotate. I've got about probably 25 topics. Haven't done this one in about a year, so it seemed like a good one to bring up, but we're open to lots of areas of focus. So I'd love to hear any feedback that you have on that. As we look at preparing assets for Muse, we're just going to tool around in the app today. I'm not doing a particular project, but I do have a link that I'm going to put into the chat that allows you to view what I'm viewing as we go along here. If you're watching the recorded instance of the session, I will go on in. Where the heck is my chat? I might be having one of those technical days, you know. Hold on. It's pretty interesting. I might be staring at it, but yeah, there it is. It's probably right in front of me. Sorry, folks. So in the chat pod, I've put a URL, and this is for the Evernote notes that I'm going to use for today's session. If you're watching the YouTube recording, it'll be in the note field below the recording. But this is kind of just a set of resources that I have available that I want to share with you as we go through the session a little bit. So taking it from the top, there are two fundamental truths about the web, and that is around the type of content that you're placing in the application. You'll want to really differentiate between what's known as vector or resolution independent content and that which is resolution dependent, or images. So if I come into Muse, if you notice in the notes here, I have a list of all the media types that are out there in the world. If I come into the Muse application, when you're bringing content in, you want to consider which file formats would be best for the type of content you're dealing with. When it comes to images, that's probably a world you're more familiar with if you come from the world of print. There's the idea of image content and how that's saved. Something like JPEG is a compression format that will reduce the size of your file. There may be some degradation in quality when you do that. So playing with different JPEG settings allow you to determine what's going to give you the type of screen quality, the fidelity you'd like, at the same time without losing out on load time in the browser. We implemented, heck, I'd have to think for a while to come up with a date, probably about 1.5 years ago, support for HiDPI devices. And the idea there is that there are a number of displays that are out there, be it iOS devices, Android devices, Microsoft devices, that are working with a much higher resolution than we had had traditionally before. So your standard desktop browser supports 72 pixel resolution, and HiDPI in essence doubles that resolution both in horizontal and vertical in essence. So you end up with an image that's 4 times the size than you had before. And as you work, the Muse application, we'll just start in with this one, allows you to select HiDPI as a file format type. So if I come in to create a new document in Muse, I'll come on and I'm going to check chat, make sure everybody's generally good. All right, Mr. Kellett saying hello. I'm in another place from my moderator, so it's always good to know everything's generally good. When I come in to create a new site, and I'll go ahead and click OK, and I actually did that too quickly, so let's do that one more time. When I come in and pull down on File to New to create a new site, I have the ability to come in and set the resolution of the site that I'm building. So by default, these days, we default to a responsive website design, and that responsive design will have a single breakpoint that's fluid. You can go back to a fixed width, kind of the old world before responsive if you choose to. But down in the advanced settings is the option to come in and set your resolution. And you'll notice I have standard and HiDPI, or 2x resolution. And if I click on that, there's a nice tutorial that'll step you through this a little bit. But I'm going to go ahead and select that Use HiDPI and come in and create my new site. So when I work, it's kind of a mental implosion, I would say, when it comes to HiDPI images. So what happens is if I create an image, and let's say the image is, you get to see how much I talk with my hands, even when I'm by myself in a recording room here. Yes, it's just you and me and my hands. But when you're designing for high resolution, you may design an image that's maybe, for all intents and purposes, 2 inches by 2 inches on your display. HiDPI does not change the height or width of that image. It makes it more intense. So it increases the resolution of that image. If I come in and select a number of images here, so I'm going to go and select File Place. As we know, I've set it to be a HiDPI site. So when I do select File Place and go to select some of my pigeon images, let's see. I've got some cubes here. Now, if I just click the spacebar on the Macintosh, you can see, in essence, what the actual size of this cube is at 72 dots per inch. Or not even, it's pixels, right? So dots per inch is print, and pixels is the screen. But it's at a resolution of 72, and that's actual size for that resolution. If I come in and select a few of these cubes and click the Open button, when I go to place the object, if I click and release, it's going to place that object at 100% of actual size. Now, I've gone in and said, you know what, I want this image to be HiDPI. So suddenly, in changing that resolution, it's going to come in at half the size that it would have had I chosen standard DPI. If instead of clicking and releasing, I press and drag, I can bring up an indicator there that's showing me how large that image is. And the way the world works, let's see if I can do that again here. So as I press and drag this guy, the way the world works is when I get to about the 50% mark, by definition, anything that is 50% or smaller will be rendered as a HiDPI image. If I go beyond 50%, let's say in this last instance, I go ahead and select 60% for the file size. What Muse does is it will look to anything that I've placed and make sure that the 2x, the double resolution, is available for that file. Now, the way this behaves in the browser is if I pull down on File to preview the page in the browser, Muse is going to render the site. But what it does is it will render, in essence, 2 versions of the HiDPI images. So let's say I have designed this site and I'm loading it on a very slow bandwidth device. So I've got a mobile device, it's my mobile layout, and someone is viewing my site. I've placed 3 images, and 2 of the images are at a resolution that will be represented as HiDPI. What happens is the browser is going to load all 3 images at the smaller resolution first, and then when the bandwidth is there, something known as asynchronous or async, in the background of the browser, that browser will download the higher resolution of this image and the higher resolution of this image, and then load it into the page without refreshing the entire page. So when you first load a page, I could exaggerate and make it much larger, but I'd rather talk about it, I suppose. When you first load up that document, there's no speed hit whatsoever for the images that are set at HiDPI. This image is going to load at a standard resolution and load once. The first two images that have the resolution available for HiDPI will load at a standard resolution, and only when the bandwidth is available, it will load that second version. So I think it's been said with HiDPI, I was concerned about file format sizes and it not really going well. I was made a fool in that I think that it was a very seamless implementation for our users and really gave you the advantage of higher resolution images on those HiDPI devices because of the asynchronous load with that image quality. So that's one first world you want to keep in mind. Again, this session is more about tips and tricks with how you prepare images and place them in the site than actually in a full-on project. There's a different world around images that's worth talking about, and that is if I use something in code for the web that's known as a browser fill, and I set something to scale to fill that container, the rules around that image optimization are a bit different. So let's see how I explain this the best. If I came in and drew a container, so I'll come in here, and I'm just going to draw a container, and I'm going to set that container to be full browser width, so stretch to that browser width. And in the fill drop down here, I'm going to go ahead and select an image, and I'll go back to this Pigeon directory here. I've got some photos, and I could take, let's see, I'll go in and just choose actually a pretty large file. There you go. Well, that's a Photoshop file. It's a little crazy large. How about this? We can go with this guy. And I'm going to place that in the container. And instead of original size, I'm going to ask it to scale to fill the container. And I'm going to align it to the left-hand side. The way the world will work with this image is if I come in and preview in the browser, I'll have that nice fill image here, and it's set to fill that container. So as I reduce the width of my page, that image is reducing. If I were to load this on a mobile device, on a phone, what happens when I've defined a background fill is Muse is never really sure how large the browser could grow. And because that browser could go as large as a 56-inch monitor in my living room, Muse is going to give the full resolution to this particular image so that it can make sure that if you scale that to be very, very large in Muse, you'll always have, or in the browser, you'll always have that image quality. So let's say you are designing and you're concerned about that. I've got a layout here, and I'm at 960, which is pretty small. I could come in and increase this, let's say, to something more like, let's say I go on in and under my breakpoint properties, I'll set this to be 1400 pixels. So pretty large instance that I'm working with. And I'll come in and let's go ahead and just reduce these three images. I'll do them as a set so that I'm in line here. And I'll bring this guy down just a bit. So in this scenario, I have this incredibly large image. It's a megabit. It's a 1 megabyte in size. And if I were to actually look at what Muse is doing in the browser, it's probably not 1 megabyte still, but it's probably rather large. And it's, as I mentioned, geared towards a very large monitor and being able to scale that monitor up and know that the image quality will be there for me. If I'm worried about a mobile instance, there are ways that I can affect that or work with it. So one of the things you can keep in mind when you're working is that with each breakpoint you define, you can set what image you might work with. So I'm going to do a little quick back end work here for a second. I believe, in order to illustrate my concept. So I'm going to go to that Pigeon asset, and we'll go to those photos, and I'll select that 1 megabyte image that was rather large, this guy right here. And I'm going to quickly go in and, yes, I am a Fireworks user. I was on Fireworks for a couple cycles as a product manager, and I've not evolved to Photoshop. So those of you that use Photoshop can extrapolate what I'm about to show you as I sip my coffee. So I've got this very large image, and that's fine. I want it for desktop devices, high bandwidth. That world is good. It's so large it's still loading up here. We'll give fireworks just a second. All right, what I want to do is come in and do a save as. So if I come in, I'll say save as. I'm going to select that same image, and I'm going to call this just my phone version. And I'll save it. Haven't made any changes yet. What I now can do is come into my image size, and I know that I do not need something that is this large. I may know that I want to have a resolution of about 144, 143.99, that's close enough. But these attributes are way too high. I know on a mobile device, on a smartphone, I want a lot less. So I can come in and, let's see if I unlock these attributes. Do not constrain my proportions, and do resample the image. I will stay constrained proportions. I'm going to cut this down a lot. Let's say about 800 pixels by 500 pixels at that 100 and roughly 144 resolution. I'll click OK. And if I go ahead and zoom into actual size, this is the actual size of that image, and it's plenty for a mobile device. I'll go ahead and save that out now. And if we go out and just look at my file formats and what I've done there, I've got that phone version, which is 400K, and we've got a mobile, we've got the desktop version, which is 1 megabyte. So the reason for this, to be really clear, in general, we will optimize images for the device that you're looking at. We will say that on a smartphone, you're looking at a smaller bandwidth or smaller width for your object, and we will optimize that content. The only time that we're not going to know how to optimize the content is if you set a container to scale to fill the width of the browser. And in that instance, we're going to go ahead and push up the highest resolution available so that we know that we'll have that if you were to span your browser very, very large. What I want to do is come on in here and say, you know what, if I were to drop down to a mobile device, let's go ahead and set this at about 480. Right about there. I'm going to drop in another breakpoint. For this particular image, I want to swap it out with the lower resolution. So I'm going to come in and browse for that image. We'll go into my assets in the photo area, and let's see. I'm going to grab that phone version. And remember HiDPI, I'm going to click and release. So I've just clicked and released, and if I were to drag the edge of this, notice you can really only tell the resolution by dragging, which is kind of clumsy, but as I drag, you can see that I'm in the 50% or less area when I clicked and released that object. So I know that that's still going to support the HiDPI instance. It's going to serve up a standard resolution on a mobile device and then backfill with the higher resolution version. What I want to do is come into, let's see, I'll be a little fancy about this. I'm just going to be a bit lazy. Well, I don't want to confuse anybody. So let's do it the right way here. I've got the larger breakpoint with my background fill that's here. I've got my smaller design for mobile with that same image. And what I want to do is come in and select this image and say, go ahead and hide in all the other, basically hide in the current breakpoint that image. So I've got it in the other breakpoint for the higher resolution displays. In the second instance, I'm going to come on in and draw myself a container once again. I'll make sure that I stretch to the browser width. And in the fill dropdown, I'm going to grab that smaller image, and I'll ask that it scale to fill the container. And I'll center it again. So I'm now going to serve up, in essence, two different images. I'll have the smaller image for my mobile device, and I'll have the larger image for the larger device. Notice that it's appearing here on both of those. Both images are appearing on that other breakpoint. What I do want to do is come into the larger breakpoint and select that image and basically hide it in the current breakpoint. So I have the large image here, and for the mobile instance, the other image. All right, I'm going to continue to sort of rattle off random bits for the design. We've talked about images, and to a large extent, you really want to consider whether it would be a JPEG or a PNG. Quite often, PNGs are important when you want transparency. So if I were to place this image again, one of the reasons why it's rather large is that it is a PNG file. If I click to release it, actually, yeah, this guy doesn't have transparency set on it. But often if you do want to have an image and you want a transparent background, you're going to save that as a transparent PNG. Tools like like Fireworks and Photoshop allow you to come in and really test the resolution that you're working with. I still have Fireworks open, so I'm going to show you this for a moment. I'm going to come into this image, and if I select 4 up, I can come in and play with different resolutions for the image. So if I have 2 examples here, I can start to see how it will behave in different instances. So let's try 2 up just for a simple comparison. And we'll get this guy going. I'm going to check chat for a minute. Make sure you guys are pretty happy. Okay, thank you, Mr. Kellett. Looking good. With these 2 images, what I can see here, again, this is Fireworks and it's what I'm familiar with, but notice that it tells you, roughly speaking, on a very, very slow dial-up modem, how long it will take to load up that image. I can come in and quickly test to see if I change out the type of file I'm dealing with. So I can come in and say, what does a ping look like? What does a JPEG look like? With ping with transparency, ping without transparency, and really set my differences for my file. If I came in here, let's say I went in with a JPEG file, it will come in and set the attributes, and notice that I'm down to a load time of 1 second instead of 17 seconds. Just ways that I can tell up front. I also can see, for me, a degradation in the image quality here, so I may want to take that trade-off or not as I'm working. All right, that is photos or images as a whole. We then step into the world of vector, that broad world of vector. And there's a couple ways that we'll talk about vector. The first has to do with typography. Let's go do my favorite lazy way of typesetting here. If I go to kickapigeon.com, happens to be on my live site, I just want to steal a little bit of text here. So if I had this text and I wanted to work with it within Muse, I'm just going to come on in here. Let's take a look at this guy. So I've got some text, and I'm going to do 3 examples of it. One is going to be a system font. Leave that cute little question mark. Another one is going to be what we call a web font, which is the vaguest naming ever. If you look in the text area here, we have something known as web fonts, we have standard fonts, and we have system fonts. We'll let this one be a standard font. And then for our last example, I'm going to come on in, and we'll call this one a web font. And what I'm going to show you with the web font is true whether it's a self-hosted font, an Edge font, or a Typekit font. Let's come in and select here for the web font. We'll go ahead and choose a Typekit font. So I can tell it's a Typekit font because it's got the little Typekit logo here. As I mentioned, what I'm going to show you is true with the web fonts, the Edge web fonts examples as well. In fact, let's go ahead and use the Edge web font for that bit there. Make it a little larger. And the standard font area, this is what we used to call it web safe fonts. These are fonts that are roughly available on any device in any browser. I say roughly because it's gotten very, very rough. There are hundreds and hundreds of browsers and devices that are out there now. Notice what they call the fallback here. So if the device I'm working with happened to have Georgia available, swell, it'll be used. If not, it's going to look for Palatino. If Palatino's not there, then it'll probably fall back to some old font that just happens to have serifs. So it's definitely something I would avoid these days if I were you. If nothing else, use a Google Web font or Typekit fonts. You have thousands of typefaces available to you as part of that library. Let's say you have a client that has a corporate font and they're in love with it and you need to use it for headlines, and that font is not available on the web in any way. I would encourage you to see if you can take, let me go ahead and show you this for a second. If you take a TrueType font that you have, there is a service called Font Squirrel. And Font Squirrel will allow you to come in using the web font generator and point to a TrueType font. So you'll come in and let's say you have a TrueType font. You do need to check with the font foundry that you've licensed that typeface from to determine if it's okay for you to use it in a web font instance. This thing will do a quick check. It's going to have you prove that you are legally eligible to convert it. And if there are protections in the font, it'll keep you from converting it. But what you can do here is in this web font generator, go off, grab a TrueType font, and convert it to a web font that you can then host yourself. If you don't do that, let's say you've got that one typeface that your client just can't live without, you can select these fonts that are known as system fonts. And this is everything I happen to have in my system. And I'll pick something slightly ridiculous to exaggerate my point. Good old Charlemagne Standard Bold by Carol Twombly of Adobe Systems a mere 25 years ago. Become a real classic in the world. Well, Charlemagne is not a web font. I don't even know if the web existed when Charlemagne came out. All right, maybe it did a little bit. But notice I get a logo here, a little T logo. And what that's doing is indicating that this is going to be converted to an image. I'm going to make our life a little easier. And let's go ahead and hide these images so that we can just focus on the text. And let's preview that text in the browser. So I'm pulling down on File to select Preview in Browser. That's pretty amazing. That's because we're on the wrong breakpoint. Fear not. Let's go back. If I go back out to my larger breakpoint and I jump on out, in fact, we're going to be extra lazy and just keep our smaller breakpoint for this example. And we're going to come in and preview. Here are my 3 different beautiful type examples. And if I zoom in on them really, really high, notice that I'm setting my browser to some bizarre, really high resolution. It's an easy way for me to exaggerate the resolution as though I were on a higher resolution device. Okay, taking it from the beginning, that system font, I've got beautiful Charlemagne, and it looks pretty terrible. Because what's happened is at the resolution of my screen, that HiDPI instance, at 144 dots per inch in essence, pixels, it has gone in and rendered the font, but it's resolution dependent. In order for us to generate that, we went in and made a bitmap. It's an image. I can press and drag that image off, and if I were at standard resolution, I might get away with it. The important thing to keep in mind, though, is the load time for this type of a typeface is incredibly slow. Because you're generating an image, and that image is resolution dependent, and I have to fling that image around. Slightly better than that is the standard font. So sure, it looks pretty clean. It's in Georgia on my machine. It might be on Palatino on yours, or some other serif font out there in the world, but I know that it will load quickly and be resolution independent. The better world is this web font, and the web font allows me to, again, pick a very odd, silly little font, but I know that it's going to load very quickly. And there's also the aspect of search engine optimization. If I were to view the source aspects here, so if I come in and I go in and say, let's try this again, view page source, and we zoom out to something we can all read easily, what you'll notice is that one example that I did, if I can find it here, is rendered as an image. See how I have an image here, and if I click it, it disappears. It's loading very slowly for some reason. Because it's a really big image file, right? I've got that PNG file here, and I can see that it's loading as a graphic. If I look at everything else, it's going to render as text or a font. The one interesting good thing about us doing that is, remember how I put the word system in the header there? When we render fonts that you use that are using a system font, we do flatten it as an image, but to make sure that you're good with search engine optimization and also screen readers for people that are visually impaired, we take the text from that block and we put it in the HTML. So here it says system, it's colorful, lightweight kick scooter. That is actually sort of extracted before we create the image so that you don't have to worry about generating what's known as an alt tag or alternate text for that image. Okay. The world of fonts now is not that different as we morph over into the idea of having one of those technical days. I'm going to look at your chat. All right. Thank you. Everyone looks pretty good. Raise your hand if there's an emergency and I'll stop. In the world of images now, there's a couple ways. You have some choices around content that you're going to work with. So let's see if we tee this up for a moment. Images, icons, things that are small visual elements that you want to use within their site. You have a few choices for how you're going to work. If you, and let's go ahead and get an example. If I go to Kick a Pigeon, you'll notice on the Kick a Pigeon site, let's make sure I'm back to actual size. As I scroll down, I have some little icons here. There's one right there. I have some here in this area. If I go all the way down to the footer, you'll notice I have Facebook, Pinterest, and Twitter icon that are here. And these are vector content. They're resolution independent. As a designer, depending on what you're doing, you have a few choices. You can render these icons as an actual typeface, an actual font that you work with, and load it into Muse. The advantage there is that it's easy to then access them when you're working rather than having to go to some image directory. So if I come over into Muse, let's see what I've got going on here. If I pull that onto File to add and remove web fonts, and switch over to the self-hosted bucket. Notice I have something here called PRC. I have another one known as Font Awesome. And then I have a third that was just a graphic icon font that I found out there as a free typeface that I could work with. These are fonts that I've created or generated and then loaded into Muse. The way I would do that is to go to Font Awesome. If it's not Font Squirrel, it's Font Awesome. The way Font Awesome works, it's pretty awesome. It's Chris Kellett's fault that I actually discovered this back in the day. And before Muse supported SVG as a native file format, this was a backdoor to try to get high-resolution icons into your site that would work very easily. What you can do is come into the full set of icons that are here. And these are open source icons. You're free to use them. Depending on what you're looking for, you can look to different sets. If you want the visual design to be really consistent, you can look at who generated them. You can also look across sets, where I might just come in and be looking for a calendar. Or not, if I type in the right place. Let's see. So here's an example of lots and lots of calendars from different. See, there's times, Checo, minus, plus O. There are a number of fonts that I can work with here. What you can do in this interface is save it out as a selected set of fonts. You can then download that as a self-hosted web font that you then use within your project. If I were over in Muse, let me show you how that works a little bit. So let's say I do have a set of icons that I want to work with. I think if I paste again, I still have some text here. And I'm going to come on in and make this more of a bulleted list. Whoops. So I'll give it a reasonable typeface. Let's go on in, and I'm feeling kind of stint today, so I'll stick with stint. And I'm going to make this more of a bulleted list. So I've got 3 items in a bullet here. What I'd like to do is come in and apply bullet styles to that. Well, I haven't defined any bullet style, so I'll come into bullets, and I can toggle on or off the bullet feature. So if I do want to apply bullets here, I'll just toggle it on. And I can come in and set certain attributes to that bulleted list. But let's say I want to be funny and I want to use an icon here rather than just the standard bullet. What I have the ability to do in the bullets area is to come in and select from fonts that I have available. Now remember we had that 2Ps Dreamweaver Dingbats, or DW, sorry, Dingbats, and there were a bunch of different graphic elements. I could alternatively go to that Font Awesome face that I know is loaded there. So notice I have Font Awesome here. I forget what I've got in it. Let's go ahead and stick with the program there. And I'm going to select Font Awesome. And what I want to do is now come in and apply a bullet from Font Awesome. So the way I can do that is, let's go ahead and set that. Let's see. I'm going to select Font Awesome. Then I'm going to go into the Glyphs panel. And I'll make sure I have Font Awesome selected. Let's see here. Let's do that in a different way. I'm going to start backwards first. If I came into this area here, decided I wanted to test, I'm going to select this. In the Glyphs panel, I'll make sure I have Font Awesome selected. I honestly do not remember what's in that Font Awesome set, so we'll find out. Okay, so when I bring up the Glyphs panel, what it allows me to do is see all of the icons that may be all of the characters of any sort for any typeface. And notice that I've gone in and with that Font Awesome face, I went to that website and I just saved out a whole lot of icons that I wanted to have available for me. And they are now here. Now, obviously, because they're icons, I don't know how to type on the keyboard to select calendar. So what I would do is bring up this Glyphs panel and figure out which one I want to work with. So for example, that calendar icon or a hard drive icon or a star. Now if I decide I want the star to be the bullet list here, what I want to do is come in and select this content. In the bullets drop down area, I'll come in and instead of using the default bullets that are associated with the typeface that I've chosen, I'm going to select Font Awesome. And then what I need to do is come in and show it which bullet to use. So for that, I'm going to go to this bullet drop down, select New Character. I've got Font Awesome set up. It's not one of the bullets. Remember, this was just sort of created on the fly using that website. So I'm going to view the entire font, and then I could come in. Hello, someone there. Just to make all of my technology that much better today. I have somebody with their, if you can mute, I probably have a past panelist. Let's see, who's got some, it's good, whoever it is has gotten quiet, thank you. Okay, good. Anyhow, I was looking for the star, I'm gonna select it. And while I'm here, I could come in and select a few others. Let's say you want to have a number of bullets available for different purposes. I can come in and select a different one. I could even jump to like the old Ps. And I might decide that I like the funky little hand-drawn star, and I'll add that. What I've in essence done is added these bullets now as an option, and notice that I can apply them to my bulleted list. Now the advantage is that this graphic element is vector content. It's resolution independent, and it can be applied inline to a group of text objects, whether or not you think that that star is a good idea or a bad idea to do that. It would be resolution independent as vector content. Another way that I could also come in and bring over vector content is using SVG, or Scalable Vector Graphics. We introduced the Creative Cloud library in our last release in February. And it, I believe, maybe I've been at Adobe too long. I didn't have high expectations around the idea of sharing assets between programs, but I believe we've done a beautiful job with Creative Cloud libraries, and it continues to evolve. It's an amazing way to have content available throughout everything from a touch-enabled device like Comp all the way up to all of your desktop applications, and to share that content with other people really easily. So with SVG, I've gone into my Creative Cloud library, and I can jump on down here And if I go to the Pigeon collection here, you'll notice that I can always view this as a list too. I've got content from Illustrator as well as from Photoshop, so vector and image content. If I come in and select this Illustrator icon cube and I drag and place that onto the canvas, let's try that again. I'll go ahead and place a copy instance. Yeah, I've been seeing, I think we've got a bug going on a little bit where some of these guys are coming in as blanks. I'm going to switch to another library. Truth is, my world tends to be a hybrid world where I'm running beta software and shipping software, and sometimes I get stuck. So I'm grabbing another icon. This is one actually Chris Kellett created for an asset that we produced a couple months back for some of our sales folks. Notice that how no matter how large I drag these items, it takes a minute to draw, because what we're doing is we're placing what's known as a poster image. So on our design canvas, we're just trying to load quickly the content. But at any time that I resize the image, it's going to re-render that on the canvas, and it shows that this is really resolution independent. So as you're working, if it's an icon that you know you're going to use all the time, you may want to go ahead and go to that Font Awesome interface. It allows you to load your own custom SVGs into a typeface as well, so that you can have that in your Glyphs panel whenever you need it. Alternatively, if you occasionally need it, you can create a Creative Cloud library that allows you to drag those items onto the canvas and make them available from that library as you're working. And the advantage, I think, also with that library is you can always name things intelligently, so that if you're going to look for the calendar icon, you can look across multiple libraries when you search in the Creative Cloud library, or just search within a current library. You can make them available to you there. From a resolution standpoint, there's no consequence or difference between whether or not it's a Font Awesome icon or it's been placed as an SVG. If it's HiDPI, that's great. It's going to render very high resolution. It's going to load once, and it's going to be vector content that'll automatically fit and work really well. All right, I want to jump off onto one other topic that is in the notes. I pinged both Chris Kellett and a fellow by the name of John from J26, who may have joined us today as well. But I wanted to ask a question around what are some of the latest techniques for making sure you have icons for your site. And the truth is, along with all of the browsers and all of the platforms that are out there, icons have gotten complex. So the way icons would manifest, the ones that I'm speaking about, are browser icons, something known as a favicon, or when you're working with touch-enabled devices like a tablet or a smartphone, the icon that represents a site if you were to save that on your home page. Now, I've got two toys going on here. Let me show you the default behavior, how you would basically implement this. So if I thought this was a fabulous site here, I could pull down on File to my site properties. And in the site properties area here, I have the ability, I have to look around a little bit, I haven't looked in a while. So under site properties, content area here, notice that I can define a favicon image. Now the favicon image, we'll go ahead and grab this real quick. If I go out and I just look for, in my Dropbox, let's see what I've got for SVG. I want to grab something simple and easy that will do the job. So we've got that SVG ribbon here. Actually, I can't work with SVG, silly girl. It has to be a PNG. So to begin with, Muse is going to expect a PNG for your icon. And I may or may not have something cute here. All right, I'm going to do, we'll do something utterly silly. So this is a way too detailed services icon, but it's a PNG file. I'm going to go ahead and select it and place it here. The rule is that it needs to be square, so it has to be whatever by whatever. It can be the largest size that you want. We're going to go in and subsample that, but that favicon image that I've just applied, if I now come in and preview the page in the browser, what happens is very quickly Muse is going to render, it's very small here in the corner, but it's going to render the icon for my browser. So you can see Font Awesome has their own icon, and now my site has an icon. So that covers the base there, but there are a lot of devices, as I mentioned, that have lots of rules, and there are two toys we can refer to. One from John is a widget that you can buy. It costs $10. If I come on into the library and pull that out, it's called Master Page Premium, and it does a lot of different things. But one thing that it does pretty clearly is allows you to go off and take different resolution icons that you've created and come in and point to those icons. So as I dig into these bits, let me kind of jump out for a second first and show you where you generate some of these guys. Another one is Chris Kellett has gone in and created something he's calling just icons widget. If I drag that onto the canvas, what you'll notice is these are different icons that different devices will require. And this widget from Chris, this one's for free, allows you to come in and go generate those images and then access them. So in either instance, again, John's tool does a whole lot of other pieces that are pretty terrific, allowing you to come in and even save it out as a web app. So this one's pretty interesting to me. And notice there's some tutorials that John's got. I mean, here as we jump right in. Both of these widgets allow, include some documentation. And what you're going to want to do is go out and generate the different icon sets that you need for the different resolutions. But using these widgets, it takes you further than the built-in Muse feature with a Favicon. It's going to allow you to really have icons for all the other devices that are there. So if I jump out to my notes for a second here, there's a couple pieces I just want to point out that you may want to grab if you are playing with this. Chris Kellett went in and created a cheat sheet that's a PDF document that you can download and open. And this document just tells you some of the blow-by-blow details around which devices are using the ICO or the icon format, favicons, standard PNGs, and when those are relevant with touch-enabled devices. In John's instance, as I mentioned, there's a link that takes you to his toy as well, his master page site. And in it, he also enumerates where you would go out to actually generate the icons. So you'll go in and take your original element. Let's say it was that funny little desk that I have here. As long as the source content is pretty good resolution, let's say 200 by 200, there are icon generating utilities on the web, and I've given you some links to those that allow you to come in and generate all the appropriate resolution and sizes for the icon that you would then use either Master Page Premium or the widget that Chris Kellett is providing to actually associate those icons with your Muse project when you publish. All right, lots of long-windedness. And as I mentioned, this is kind of a smattering of all sorts of bits with preparing content for the web. I'm going to jump out and see how chat's going. Q&A, I don't think there's been, all right, there's been 4 answered questions. If you can, if there's anything that's come up earlier on in the dialogue that I should cover now, please go ahead and throw it into the chat, and I'm happy to jump on that. We have a good 5 or 6 minutes left at this point. So Valerie wanted the link to the notes this week. I did do it earlier in the chat, but let me pull that in again. If you are watching the YouTube recording, I will go ahead and put this in the footer of the recording notes so that you can get to it from there. But that is the URL for that bit. I'm going to also be nice to us all and go ahead and put up a poll here and get feedback on this session. So as I mentioned, this is a nuts and bolts session. We should probably categorize it as such. It's not a workflow session necessarily, but just showing you some of the resources that are available that I've gathered up over time. If you have other topics that you feel are pressing that we haven't covered in a while, put them in the chat. I'm always open to either rotating through something we haven't talked to in a while or jumping in. There's probably, I don't know, 2 weeks from now, there's probably merit. I think that probably one of the biggest things that we still need to teach the world about is the world of responsive design and how to really work with widgets in the tool, and also how people are achieving things. So what I tend to do is we have Site of the Day, and we select from a few hundred submissions each week. If you submitted a design and when you weren't picked, please know that we appreciate it and consider it. But we do pick a few each week, and we've been really focusing on responsive sites lately. I will probably do a jam session on how did you do that, where there are different techniques that come up for folks as they're building out responsive designs that are not that clear to see how it was created. Looks like Stephen is suggesting plan view, page properties, metadata, SEO. I would love to do that one. SEO is like black magic. It always makes me a little nervous. I did a good jam session probably 2 years ago on standard SEO. I'll probably leverage that. There's some good straight up kind of beginner's guide to SEO. We can cover that. But I agree with you, Stephen, just really understanding how our world works with responsive now that we have a single URL, and how search engines address that. I guess I'm feeling a bit brash, so I'm with you. Let's go ahead and do SEO next, and then Susanna will dig into responsive in 4 weeks. Yes, Mr. Perry. I know. I need to do some homework, so you, along with some of the other vendors that have, I know that Steve Harris with Muse Themes is always terrific with SEO. I'll do a little bit of homework, I promise. I'll be ready 2 weeks from now, and we'll focus on SEO and optimization for your site plan. Thank you, everyone, for your time. I'm going to jump out, but I'll see you here in 2 weeks. Search engine, here we come, and optimizing websites. And send in your Site of the Days. Let us know how things are going for you in the forum. Keep your ear to the ground. We've got a new release coming out in not too long with some new functionality I think you'll enjoy. So keep doing what you're doing, and we will talk to you soon.